Hi you guys, welcome, välkomna, добро пожаловать. My name is Salmansa Rogers. Today is Friday and I have another crazy true crime story for you guys. Today's case, as you guys can tell by the title of this video, is from Sweden. It's another true crime story from Sweden. It is about the most hated Swedish woman right now. Researching this case made me realize how messy this woman is. Like, it's so much going on in this woman's life, or had been going on leading up to this story that I'm about to tell you. But I'm not gonna, the details are too much. And literally researching this, I was confused several times. I will, of course, cover most of this case, the most relevant and important points of this case for sure. And as my usual disclaimer, this case is going to be a tad bit graphic. I will talk about knife stabbings and injuries or what have you. So, of course, if that's something that you don't want to listen to today, I totally understand. Take care of yourself, take care of your mental health, and I just hope I see you in the next video. I will for sure reveal the perpetrator's name, but the victims in this case I will keep hidden just for privacy and respect. Like I said, in my cases, I want to shed light on the actual asshole, the perpetrator, and kind of give the victims a little bit break. Okay, you guys, enough rambling from me. Let's jump into today's case. So today's case takes place in Arboga, Sweden, and the year is 2016, and the date is August 3rd. So on August 3rd, that night, a 65-year-old woman calls the emergency service 112, which is the same as 911 here in America. And in the police recording, you can hear her say, "I think I'm dying. I'm bleeding profusely. I think my husband is dead upstairs in the bed. I don't know what happened. I think someone broke into our home and attacked us." The 65-year-old woman was on the phone with the emergency operator for 45 minutes. She had to basically explain how to get to her because, you see, when she called, she was actually in her summer house, sommarstuga, as we would say in Swedish. This summer house was located in Granliden, a little outskirts outside Arboga, close, or actually on one of the largest lakes in Sweden called Hjälmaren. So it took a little while for the 65-year-old woman to explain. And it was a little tricky. If you don't know, if you've never been there, it's very foresty. It was a little bit hidden from the public. And again, it was outskirts. So it took a while for the emergency personnel to get to the woman. Once they arrived, they just found a bloodbath. It was stains of blood in this cottage. They quickly rushed upstairs and they found this woman's husband. He was already deceased. The husband was covered in his own blood from head to toe, and later during the autopsy report, they could establish that he actually passed away from blood loss. They quickly rushed the 65-year-old woman to the hospital, and she was being operated on for 4 hours. She sustained around 18 to 25 stab wounds, and she got 68 stitches. At first, the police believe that this was an attack done by the woman, that she intentionally wanted to kill her husband, and then maybe he woke up and they began fighting, and then she stabbed him basically to death. But this quickly ruled out a few days later when the woman woke up after her surgery and began telling her side of the story. So according to the 65-year-old woman, her and her husband they are retired. They no longer working, and they had the summer cottage or summer house for a few good years. But now, as they're getting older, it's a lot of to take care of, to clean the cottage, to keep the outside clean, and the gardening and what have you. So it's a little bit too much for them, even though they love their place. It was a very, very cozy and like just foresty, and the lake is there, so it's very magical and romantic, and kind of like give them a little break from the city life. But they actually recently purchased like a van, or like a house on wheels, or whatever you want to call it. So, and they have been exploring a bunch of other new places around. I think also they took this van to, I think, like other places in Europe. They like literally did like a Europe trip with it. So they discovered that this was much easier to have like a house on wheels, to discover new places. It's not as much, to maintain or keep clean or what have you. It's not as hard as owning a summer house. So they decided to sell this summer house, and that's what they were doing. Basically, they were cleaning it out to start beginning like showings for other potential buyers to come and see the house. So at that day, on the 3rd of August, they were basically at the summer house cleaning it out, unpacking their stuff and what have you, throwing away stuff they no longer needed. And according to the 65-year-old woman, when the police asked her, like, do you guys have any enemies? Can you think of anyone that could have done this to you? She actually said yes. And she named one potential suspect that she believes that could possibly, or she was pretty certain that this person is behind this vicious attack. And this person that the 65-year-old woman pointed out to the police was no other than her own daughter, Johanna Möller, or Johanna, as I will refer to her as because it's in English, Johanna in Swedish. So Johanna was actually this 65-year-old woman's youngest daughter. She had another daughter that was a few years older than Johanna. So the police didn't wait no longer. They gave Johanna a visit. They actually already visited Johanna the next day on August 4th to break the news to her that her mother and father had been attacked in a vicious, brutal knife attack, and that unfortunately her father passed away, but her mother is in intensive care and she's being operated on. This time when the police visited Johanna was more serious, because now her own mother is basically pointing her out to be behind this vicious attack. When the police visited Johanna, she was crying. She definitely had nothing to do with this. She couldn't believe that her own mother could even, blame her for such horrific things. Sure, maybe her and her mother was not on the best terms. She was more of a daddy's girl, but this is ridiculous. She would never hurt her mother, and she was basically putting on a very good performance. She was crying and, being very believable, and being basically this grieving daughter that she claimed to be. At this point, police basically didn't have any reason to arrest Johanna. They didn't have any proof, no evidence. So they left. And as soon as they left, Johanna turned to her boyfriend and started laughing and basically telling him that I'm such a good actress. But despite the dramatic performance from Johanna, the police were not convinced. So they decided to bug her and her boyfriend's phone. And that's how they basically found out that as soon as, Johanna was on the suspect list, she and her boyfriend decided to escape. They decided to go to Thailand for a month, and just until this all is over with, what have you. And mind you, her mother is in the hospital recovering. You just lost your father, and like, if you're really innocent, going on say if this was a vacation, that would be the last thing on my mind. I would be by my mom's bedside in the hospital, taking care of her, arranging the funeral, whatever it needs to be, done. So since the police were listening into the phone, Johanna's phone and her boyfriend's phone, they overheard that they are planning to go into Thailand, and on the day that they were, or Johanna was supposed to fly out and her boyfriend was supposed to kind of like drive there, or he was supposed to drive through Europe, um, they arrested Johanna at Arlanda airport in Stockholm, and they arrested her boyfriend also close by to Arlanda airport. Both Johanna and Mohammed were released, I believe 3 days. They were in custody for 3 days, but lack of evidence, they were released. And at this point, the police is still listening into their phones, and these two idiots, literally the same day as they are released, they're sitting in the car, and you can basically hear Johanna say, you have to deny everything. They just playing mind games on you. They're gonna act like they know stuff. They don't know shit, and what have you. And also at some point you can hear her laugh again and say, oh my God, we're such a criminals. Like kind of like saying it in a way that she's proud of it. We're such a criminals. And again, planning on going somewhere else, basically escaping Sweden. So at this point, the police start also interviewing potential witnesses that lived around the summer cottage that Johanna's parents were attacked at. And one witness was actually seeing a orangey colored car vehicle, and the police came to find out that a similar type of colored car was owned by Johanna. It was her company's car. So they quickly established a warrant and they searched through that car. And what do you have? They found bloodstains. Bloodstains belong to Johanna's father. And also, when they, of course, arrested Johanna and Mohammed the first time, when they arrested them at the Arlanda airport, they took their DNA. And when they run that DNA, they could establish that Mohammed's DNA was found on Johanna's father. So at this point, they have pretty strong evidence against Joanna and Mohammed. So they arrest them for the second time. And this time they found them in Norway at a hotel in Norway. They've been taking some drugs, drinking alcohol, or what have you. And they arrested them and brought them back to Sweden. So I'm going to stop right there on the arrest. And I'm going to actually go back to who this Johanna Möller or Johanna Möller is. I want to tell a little bit about her life. Like I said in the beginning of this video, this woman is messy, like messy. Her life is twisted and, just, yeah, crazy. So I'm going to just, talk about a little bit about her life so you guys can get kind of like get to know her and form your own opinion about this woman. Johanna Möller, she was born in 1975. And her growing up was pretty normal. At 7 years old, she discovered passion for gymnastics, and she was a very good gymnast, I think you say that. And she used to perform and what have you. But when Johanna became a teenager, she became very rebellious. And, her and her parents had a hard time with her. She sneaked out the house, did a bunch of, how you do when you're a teenager, meet up with boys. And speaking of boys, according to Johanna's past, she was kind of like a boys magnet in school. Like boys just flocked to her. They loved her. And she loved the attention that she got. And she discovered manipulation. She was very good at manipulating boys into doing stuff for her, and they willingly did so. And Johanna actually dropped out of high school, and she became pregnant with her first child. I couldn't find much information about the father of her first child. But then she married another man, and with this man, she got 3 children. So now total, she has 4 children. But soon after her fourth child, Johanna realized that this housewife marriage life was boring. She was bored of her husband and bored of this life that she had for herself. So she decided to have an affair with her neighbor. And her husband found out after a few months, found out about the affair, and he, of course, left her. So she continued this, or not, it's not affair anymore, but she continued dating this neighbor. And then she was basically tired of him as well, so she broke up their relationship. At this point, Johanna is around in her late 20s, and she decided she actually wanted to do something, and she decided to go back to school. Basically, she felt like she needed some sort of an education, and she took a student loan and began studying. She also briefly was dating a college professor at that time. When she was done with her studies, she realized that her life were basically not the same as her sister. So she was kind of like envious of her sister, because you see, her sister and her dad were very close. In fact, they opened a business together. This was a jewelry business that would bring in a lot of money. And after a while, the dad and Johanna's sister sold their company and made even more money. So they were very well established. So Johanna was very envious of that, because her sister, she is financially stable. Her parents have money, and here she is in her late, or now she's in her early 30s, and the only thing she has is a bunch of student loan debts. But her parents were very, very generous. They helped Johanna out a lot financially, because I mean, that's their daughter. And also, in my personal opinion, I think it's also had to do with that she had 4 children at this point, and like helping out the grandchildren and what have you as grandparents. So according to Johanna's mother, she actually kept a little logbook of how much money they gave her, and it was a lot. It was a lot of money that she received from her parents. By 2014, Johanna started dating a new man, and this man and Johanna would actually have 2 children together, 2 twins, a boy and a girl. So that is a total of 6 children that Johanna has now. And at first, this relationship looked amazing and promising, but later on, according to Johanna, this man was very, very abusive to her. He was violent, he was physically and mentally abusive, to the point that Johanna's dad actually bought an apartment for Johanna and the children to live in, to kind of get away from this relationship. Johanna was, of course, super happy about it. She moved into that apartment, and a few months later, Johanna's dad come to find out that her boyfriend, her so-called abusive boyfriend, is living with them. And not only does this so-called abusive boyfriend live together with Johanna in that new apartment, Johanna and this man got married. So this is now Johanna's second husband. And of course, the dad got super mad, because, like, you've been telling me that he is this abusive guy, and I'm helping you out to get away from this relationship, to get kind of like a new start for you and the children. And now he's living with you in the apartment I bought for you, and you guys are married. Not only did they get married, they also took a life insurance policy out on each other. Was around 2 million Swedish krona. And not long after that, Johanna's now second husband will be found dead, drowned in the lake, in the same summer house where later her parents will be attacked. According to Johanna, her and her second husband and the kids were going to the summer cabin for the weekend to celebrate her husband's birthday. And they stopped on the way to the cabin. They stopped at this grocery store. They got a lot of liquor, a lot of bottles, wine, beer, hard liquor, a lot of food because they gonna stay there for a few days, and they drove after that drove to the cabin. And during the night, apparently according to Johanna, her and her husband kind of start arguing about a food dish or what have you. And Johanna just took the kids, went upstairs to go to bed, and kind of forget about this whole fight. And then later or early in the morning, she woke up and she see that her husband has not even slept next to her. She first thought that maybe, he slept on the couch or what have you. She went downstairs. He was not downstairs. And then she thought maybe he's, out fishing or somewhere around the summer cabin. And she kind of, went by her morning, cooked some breakfast for the kids. But later on, when her husband didn't return for lunch, she became worried. So she called 112, so 911, to the emergency services and explained that her husband is missing. She haven't seen him since last night, and she can't find him anywhere. And when the emergency personnel came out to the cottage, they found her husband drowned in the lake, and he was like laying in the lake, the shallow area of the lake, and presumably drowned. And his, cause of death was ruled as an accident because they also found some level of alcohol in his system. But according to this man's family and close friends, this was basically ridiculous because this man was very, very athletic. He worked out 4 or 5 times a day. He was a great swimmer, and that he's just going to randomly, drown in a shallow part of the lake didn't seem, it was very suspicious for the family. But it wasn't until Johanna tried to take out the insurance policy of the 2 million krona, literally, I believe, a month after her second husband's death, that the insurance company became very suspicious because usually, if you're a grieving widow, it's not like at least you wait 6 months or what have you to do that, but not 1 or 2 months after your husband's death. So the insurance company contacted the authorities, and the authorities began an official investigation. And this time it was more pointing to a homicide than accidental drowning. Another thing that the police found very suspicious was the alcohol and the food that was purchased by Johanna and her husband to be consumed during those 2, 3 days that they were at the cabin. And once the police arrived to investigate the cabin, they couldn't find alcohol. Like basically everything was gone, and it's impossible for just one woman to consume that much alcohol in that short amount of time. So police believe that it was not just Johanna in that cabin and her husband. The police believe that basically was other people in that cabin too, and possibly those people are involved in Johanna's husband's murder. Later on, they actually re-examined Johanna's husband's body, and they could determine that the water in his system, that basically he didn't drown in the lake. The consistency of the water that was found in his body was not the same consistency as in the lake. So the consistency that was found in Johanna's husband's dead body now was same consistency as whale water. So they basically, the police thinks that he was killed somewhere else, drowned in a whale, and then brought to the lake, tossed into the lake, so it looked like he drowned in the lake. Despite all of this evidence pointing towards Johanna and possible two or one other suspect that could be involved. And basically, this case is still ongoing. They still try to figure out, and Johanna has still not been officially charged for her second husband's murder. Another thing that I forgot to mention is during this whole time before the accidental death, drowning of her second husband, Johanna actually opened a private business together with her business partner. And this business was basically housing refugees, young refugees from different countries, mainly from Afghanistan. And these refugees were between the ages of 15 to 25, mostly boys. And in this period of time, the marriage to Johanna, between Johanna and her second husband, was kind of crumbling. Johanna was pretty occupied with her now new job, helping refugees. And at this point, her second husband actually had another woman. He started an affair with this other woman, and some sources claim that at this point their relationship between Johanna and her second husband was kind of like an open relationship, that Johanna knew about this woman and it was okay for her, you know. And some people claim that this could be the reason why Johanna murdered her husband, because she felt like, oh, you know, he's going to divorce me, he's going to leave me for this other woman, and I will then not get his money. I would not get his, you know, nothing from him. So it's, you know, they speculate that it's better for me to kill him to get his insurance policy, because once I'm divorced, it's no insurance policy. And that this little cabin getaway was basically staged. That at this point, you know, their relationship was pretty much done. And this was like a desperate attempt for Johanna to kind of like, you know, go through her vicious plan. Soon after Johanna's second husband's passing, or the, you know, suspicious passing, as I should put it, she wasted no time to move in a 20-year-old refugee boy by the name of Mohammed Rajabi. And some sources even claim that she actually kicked her own son out of the apartment to make room to move this boy into her apartment, basically. And Mohammed was born in Iran, and his parents were from Afghanistan, but they lived in Iran. And as soon as Mohammed turned 18, he actually decided to, you know, come to Sweden and to better his life, basically better his life, and eventually, you know, move his parents to Sweden as well, help his parents out. And he actually crossed several European countries to then later to come to Sweden. And he came to Sweden in 2015, and he was living at one place first for refugees, and then he was transported to this private company that Johanna owned, and he lived there. And then after a while, Johanna kind of like almost forced him, according to what I was reading. Like, it felt like it was not mutual. Like, at first he didn't wanted to live with her. She convinced him to live with her. It would be better off for him, you know. And pretty quickly, Johanna and Mohammed became a boyfriend and girlfriend. They became, you know, they had a sexual relationship, and basically Johanna considered him as her boyfriend. One morning, Johanna's co-worker is reading the newspaper, and she sees that two refugee boys came out to the newspaper saying that they were forced to have sex with their boss. If they didn't, they would be deported. And it was also a video recording of this boss person, who was a woman, basically telling the boys, kind of like threatening them, if you guys don't have sex with me, you guys will be I would report you and you guys will be deported. And it turned out that this boss was Johanna. According to Johanna, this was all lies. This never happened, even though that they had a videotape and it was her on the tape. She basically denies everything. And after that, though, her firm suffered. I believe that they were still, they were still open, but they didn't receive as much refugees as usual. So it kind of like died down. And I think also at that point, her coworker were basically telling her to kind of like resign. I don't want to work with you anymore. Like, if you don't resign, I will. Kind of like giving Johanna an ultimatum. But basically, nothing of this, like, Johanna didn't suffer any legal consequences as far as, jail or anything else. Like, and this is crazy because if this was a man, if Johanna was a man, it would be a whole nother story. So, like I said in the beginning of this video, this woman had a messy life, okay? So, at this point, Johanna's father, we are now in the year of 2016, okay? So, Johanna's father basically have enough. With all of this shit's going on with her life, she first claims that her boyfriend was abusive. Her dad buys this apartment for Johanna and the kids for her to get away from him, and she moves in together with him and then get married to her abusive boyfriend. And now he is dead, and she moves in with a boy, basically a boy, into her this apartment, and she began a sexual relationship with him and kicking out her own son. And now she have this sex scandal with other boys at her work. So all of this is just enough for Johanna's father, which I totally understand. So he basically calls her and tells her, listen, I am going to sell the apartment. You have 6 months to find a new place. I'm not taking care of you anymore financially. This, enough is enough. You're a grown-ass woman. You need to figure out your life. And at this point also, like I said in the beginning or early on in the video, Johanna's mother kept a little log of, all of the financials, all the money that they have given Johanna. And at this point, they decided to kind of reconstruct their will. So basically, they would split all of their money that goes, split the money so they can give half to each daughter. But since they helped Johanna so much, so whatever money that they already have given Johanna, they actually took that out of the will, and Johanna left with less than her sister. So her sister would give maybe like 80% of the will, and Johanna would give only 20, because again, she already got so much. And the parents thought that this would be only fair for both of them, or for the other sister to receive as much as Johanna already have received. So this, of course, didn't sit well with Johanna. So she started to talking bad about her parents to Mohammed. She'd been basically saying how she hates them. They've been, treating her unfair her whole life. They always prioritized her sister over her. And at some point, she even told Mohammed that her dad was sexually abusing her as a teenage girl, and that she hated him for that her whole life. And she also said that her mother never cared for her as a mother should. She claims that her mother believed that she was a stillborn, and when she was born, she was not a stillborn. She was not dead. So her mother basically expected her child would be born dead, and she wasn't. And that basically her mother never bonded with her well. A bunch of nonsense, which is, by the way, not true. None of them were true. Her mother later stated that during the time of this claimed sexual assault, Johanna's mother was stay-at-home mom, and their dad was always at work. So, this is not true. And so not only did Johanna talk bad about the parents, she basically started asking Mohammed to kill them. She said that, I want their heads, chop off their body. Are you willing to kill for me? Basically kind of like, talking him into this. At first, Muhammad was actually angry at Johanna for even mentioning this and telling him to kill her parents. And he said that he's not a killer. If this is the thoughts that you have, we better break up because I'm not about to kill anyone. But as time went by, she was very, very persistent with this. And at a point, Muhammad just broke and he's like, okay, I'll do it for you. So now I will discuss the time of the events that happened on that fateful August 3rd, the night of August 3rd. So this is, of course, according to Muhammad and according to Johanna. She's innocent. She had nothing to do with this. And so she is basically pled innocent throughout this whole ordeal. So according to Muhammad, he was by himself that day during August 3rd, during the day. So instead of sitting at home, he decided to go and meet his friends and, just chill with his friends. And he also admits that during the time with his friends, he took some cocaine and, was drinking alcohol or what have you. And then at one point, around 7 p.m.-ish, he received a text from Johanna basically telling him to come home. And so he did. He came home, and when they were at home, Muhammad, took some more drugs. And some sources claim that both of them took the drugs together. Some sources claim that it was just Muhammad. Later on in the evening, Johanna and Muhammad took Johanna's company car and they drove off. And during the car ride, Johanna basically asking Muhammad, "Are you sure you're gonna do this? Are you sure you're gonna able to kill my parents?" And he basically said that, "You're driving me there, aren't you? So that's your answer." Once arriving to the cabin, they parked a few meters away from the cabin, and Johanna gave Muhammad instructions, kind of saying that make sure you see that all the lights in the cabin is off. That means that both of the parents are sleeping. She even kind of explained to him, how to get upstairs and the sleeping arrangements, who would sleep on what side and what have you. So he kind of had like an overlook of the cabin or inside or what have you. She also gave him a change of clothes and a knife. And Muhammad went. He said that he was standing outside the cabin for a few minutes to kind of like make sure that the lights were off. And also he claims that he didn't want to do this, of course. And he also said that he would, if the door was locked, he would see it as a sign to not do this. But fate will have it, the door was actually unlocked. And later come to find out that Johanna's father, actually, he used to drink when he's in the cabin, kind of like a little night drink or what have you. So he forgot to lock the door and he went straight to bed. And the door was unlocked, so Muhammad took it as a sign. He went upstairs and he kind of also stayed outside the bedroom door to listen to make sure that the parents were really asleep. And then this is the photo of the recreation of what happened. As you guys can see here, he's on top of Johanna's dad and stabbing him profusely. And then in this photo, he is stabbing Johanna's mom while still on top of the dad. And then just quickly want to point out that when they were talking to Johanna's mom that night of what happened, she remembers that she went to bed before Johanna's dad. Usually they do that. So she's usually going to bed around 9 p.m. while the dad always stays up late and watch the 10 p.m. late news. And after that, he comes up. And at this night, she fell asleep. So she never heard him come upstairs and lay down. So she was already passed out. But she recalls waking up feeling like she got elbowed, and she assumed that was her husband basically elbowing her to tell her stop snoring. But when she got up the bed, she just see a figure, and she couldn't really recall. So she thought that was her husband, and she basically telling him, "What are you doing? What's going on?" And then she felt another blow, and just everything went dark. And then she doesn't know how long she was passed out. And at this point, when she woke up, she remembered that the bed was very warm and wet, but it felt cozy and felt nice, and she wanted to kind of like doze off again. But for some reason, she's like, no, I need to go to the bathroom. She went to the bathroom, and when she looked at herself in the mirror, she couldn't believe her eyes. She didn't recognize the woman. She was literally bleeding, and that's when she also lost a tooth. She literally spit out, she had something in her mouth, and she spit it out in the sink, and it was her tooth. And then later she went down to, after that, she went downstairs to phone 112. Back to Muhammad and his side of the events, or his story of what happened. So after he stabbed both parents, he rushed downstairs and went outside the door, and he went in back to the car. And at this point, Johanna had dozed off, and she kind of like woke up, and he was all bloody, and she's like, what happened? And he's like, you want to go and see for yourself? And then after that, he like shut up and just drive. So they drove off. They went home. He showered off. They washed his clothes in the washer, and then he was just so exhausted and he fell asleep. And he actually didn't hear the police come in the early morning to tell of the horrific news that that Johanna's father had passed away and the mother was attacked. So Muhammad was in bed sleeping because he was exhausted. So it was Johanna that opened the door. So he didn't hear the police coming that morning. Like I said, Johanna, she denied all of it. At first, she, acted like she was very traumatized and she couldn't believe it. And she said that, basically blaming Muhammad, that he came home and told her, I killed your parents for you. And she just started laughing because she couldn't believe it was true. Like, this is outrageous. And then at one point, according to the phone, when the police were listening into the phone, you could clearly hear that she knew exactly what was going on. She even called themselves criminals and laughing about it and all of that. Inside the jail, waiting for the trial, Johanna was actually caught sneaking some notes. She was basically writing some notes, and she was like kind of like trying to sneak some notes to Muhammad and some notes to her own to her own family. And at one note, I'm going to insert here. It is in Swedish. You can pause the video and read it, but it's basically a note to her son to take the blame, basically saying that he would kill the bastards and take the whole blame of killing his own grandparents, basically. During the trial, Johanna basically blamed everything on Muhammad, again saying that she didn't have anything to do with this. She would never ever do that. She loved her family. She also said that, even though her mother and her didn't get along, but she still loved her mother. She only wanted love from her mother that she never had. She basically states that her mother was very egoistic and, put herself first before her children, and she never felt love from her. But that's like, kidding me? Like, are you describing yourself? Muhammad, on the other hand, was very remorseful. He was also crying, but he was begging for forgiveness. He said that he was very sorry, and he was begging Johanna's mom to forgive him for what he done. And he told his side of the story, and he stuck to it throughout the court as well. And since he was only 20, he could, in Swedish law, you cannot get a life sentence if you're under 25, and he was only 20 during the time of the killing. So he received 14 years and deportation. Johanna received life in prison, and they didn't say specifically how long time, because again, if you guys have been with me and I've covered other Swedish cases, you already know life in Sweden means around 10 to 15 years. But according to some sources, I believe she got the extreme punishment, and I believe her life sentence is between 18 to 20 years. And this is pretty much it for today's case. Like I said, I wanted to cover the most important part of this case. There's so much other stuff, like for instance, how Johanna and Mohammed got caught. They actually escaped, how they escaped to Norway or what have you. But I figured that would just be too much. People would get confused. I was confused researching this. So I just mentioned 60% of this whole case, but 60% the most important part. But again, if you wanted to listen, I'm going to leave some links in the description box so you guys can listen to this case. It's in Swedish though, so just FYI. But if you want to hear all of the nitty-gritty details, you can hear it in the click the links below. But yeah, till this day, Johanna is claiming that she's innocent and that it was basically Mohammed, that it was all his doing. And I know that I shouldn't feel sorry, but I kind of feel sorry for Mohammed at some point. Like, it's because, it's a young guy. He wanted to move from his home country to come to Sweden to get a better life, to get an education, to working, make his own money. And it just took him to get involved with the wrong person, and it literally ruined his whole life. Tragic both ways. And also Johanna's 6 kids. I know, the some kids are older now, in their 20s or so, but she has some younger kids, so I'm assuming they're well taken care of. They live with relatives, but it's just tragic, like that they had to go through like all of this. I'm very interested in knowing what you guys think of this case. Have you heard of this case? What's your opinion on this case? And if you are from Sweden or living in Sweden, let me know if I miss any details. I know, like I said, I didn't cover everything because it's so much in this already. So, but if I miss anything that's super important, please let me know in the comments below. And of course, if you leave comments, make sure they are nice. You never know who's reading. Don't forget, like, share, and subscribe. Helps my channel a lot, and I'm very appreciative of you guys spending your time with me. And I hope I see you guys next Friday. Till then, take care of yourself. Ciao Cacao.